Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the introduction to Digital Research Alliance of Canada. My name is Rachel, and part of the UBC ARC team supporting research engagement and training. We're really glad that you could join us today as part of the 2026 ARC Summer School. Just a quick note that the session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. The link to the video and the deck will be shared with you after the session. Also, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions at any point during the session. You're also welcome to submit questions anonymously. We'll do our best to respond either during or at the end of the session. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver campus is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people, and the UBC Okanagan is situated on the lands of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. We're grateful to live, learn, and work on these lands. I'm now pleased to introduce today's presenter. Michael is a cloud analyst at UBC ARC. He's also the member of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada's Cloud National Team and the Arbutus Cloud Operations National Team. In his role, Michael manages many of the ARC's cloud pilot projects and support Canadian researchers in the community of public cloud. I'll now hand things over to Michael to get started. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for making the time this afternoon to attend our session as part of this year's summer school. Give me a second to share my slide deck and then we can get started. All right. Well, as Rachel shared, this afternoon's session is regarding an introduction to the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. As part of this session, we will first touch on what is the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. Then we'll go over a very high-level overview of all the computing services that are available to researchers, Canadian researchers, UBC researchers. And then we'll also go over several other services that are available through them as well. And lastly, what are the training and support that are available for these resources? And that's Rachel also shared that I'll be happy to answer questions throughout this session. But I also have some logical ends of each sections that I'll pause and see if there's anyone has any questions that they would like to ask. But at the very end, I'll also be able to take some questions. So the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, or also known as the Alliance, or sometimes in documentation, you may also see the acronym DRAC, D-R-A-C, serves Canadian researchers with the objectives of advancing Canada's position as a leader in the knowledge economy in the international stage. By integrating, championing, and funding the infrastructure and activities required for advanced research computing, research data management, and research software. They provide the platform for the research community to access tools and services faster than ever before. So as part of the session, we'll be going over some of the services available as part of these major pillars, especially in the advanced research computing column and the research data management column. Also within the alliance, we also have regional partners. As you can see here, there are AceNet in the Far East, Calcul Quebec as part of the province of Quebec, Compute Ontario for the province of Ontario, and then we have there isn't a regional group or regional partner as part of the Western four Western provinces, but then institutions, universities do collaborate between themselves, amongst ourselves. What are our roles? So the role of the Alliance, as I sort of touched on in a couple of slides back, provide some of the leaderships around the services and the resources available nationwide. So that includes the Resource Allocation Competition, also known as the RAC. We'll touch on that later during this presentation. Procurement, coordinating research data management, other national services. The role of regions, so that includes Ontario, Quebec, coordinate local activities such as training, staff management, and ensuring needs of the institutions and provinces are being met. So we'll also touch on that. As I mentioned before, Western Canada doesn't have a regional organizations, but as a university, as UBC, we do also collaborate individually institutions across the country, but also institutions in the Western provinces. So first, I would like to touch on the terminology academic principal investigator. This is the terminology you'll see in a lot of the documentations around the resources available through the Alliance. And these are the researchers that are eligible for these resources. So they can access the Federation resources and services. So that includes some of the compute services that we'll be discussing today. Eligible to request resources via the rapid access service for the resource allocation competition, and they can also sponsor users. So for those that are part of the research team that does not meet these eligibility criteria, the principal investigator can sponsor them accounts. So who are eligible as an academic principal investigator according to these eligibility criteria include faculty members. So they are full-time or part-time faculty members at a Canadian university, college, or research hospital that's eligible to hold CFI grants. Or you're an adjunct faculty, full-time or part-time, or you are a librarian. So if you or someone in your research team falls under these have one of these roles, you'll be eligible to request for resources. Next, CCDB accounts. These are another terminology that you may see as you interact with the Alliance resources. This is the account you use to access these resources. So if you don't yet have an account, you'll need to request for an account. So if you are, as we mentioned, as an academic principal investigator, you'll apply for an account, and somebody within your institution will review your request and approve your account, and then you'll be able to access and request for these resources. However, if you're not an academic principal investigator, you can also request for an account, and you'll list your principal investigators identifier, or known as CCRI, in the form of that you see here on the slides. And then your PI will be notified of your request, and they can approve that they are sponsoring your account. For more information about CCDB account, feel free to access the link on the slide, or you can also ask questions here today. I'll pause here very quickly. Do we have any questions? Otherwise, we'll go ahead with discussing about computing services available through the Alliance. Right, so maybe we'll jump ahead. So computing services. So first and foremost, the high performance computing clusters. So there are 5 high performance computing clusters across the country, including FIR, that's hosted at SFU, NIBI, Norvell, Rockwell, and Trillium. How do you request for access? So once you have access to a CCDB account that we just discussed, you can log into the CCDB portal and request access for each specific cluster that you need access to, as you can see here on the screenshot. Usually the systems sync pretty quickly, so we're talking about at most an hour, and then your request will be synced into the cluster. You'll be able to access those resources if you're PI, and if you are not a PI, you'll be able to access the resources that your PI has access to. Something to note is if you're requesting for access to any resources that are based in Quebec, there is an additional steps in your request where you have to agree to service level agreement and the terms of use. And this particular case with the compute clusters, referring to the Rockwell cluster that's based in Quebec. As part of those high performance computing clusters, you have access to central processing units, also known as CPU, graphics processing units, known as GPU, and high performance storage. And some of the use cases or research workflows that you would can leverage this resource include things like Python code, ANSYS, the software, OpenFOAM, parallel programming. But you can also run notebooks and virtual desktops on these resources. And to help you get familiar with how you use these resources and get you started, there's a link to the documentation there. Once you have access to resources, how will you access these resources? There's two main ways to access these resources. The classic way is through SSH, so that's through the terminal. So where you'll need the name of the cluster. So for example, you're accessing FIR, you have FIR, and then it's fir.alliancecan.ca. Your username, so something to note is not the CCRI, which we briefly mentioned about the PI CCRI, or anyone that is not an academic principal investigator also has a CCRI, but that's not what you'll use to log in. You'll actually use your 8 alphanumeric character username. For example, J Smith here as an example here on the slide. And you also need a SSH key. That's a mistake. There's no password. SSH key, and then also multi-factor authentication. That's something you have to register through CCDB, and you SSH in through the terminal. The second way of accessing these resources is through a web portal. In some cluster, they use something called Jupyter Hub, for example, like FIR and Rockwell. For a Rockwell, where you have access to an interface like was shown on here on the slide, where you have access to software like a terminal with Python, RStudio, VS Code, a desktop, and many others. Or in some other cluster, you also have a web portal, but using a platform called Open on Demand, such as Trillium and Nibi. Something to note, this is the same web portal software that we here at UBC uses for our local cluster as well, Sockeye. And through this portal, you have access to applications like Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook, RStudio, Desktop, and many others. Besides the high-performance computing clusters across the country, there are also cloud resources. So this is resources that allow you to spin up virtual machines for many research use cases that can't leverage a high-performance computing cluster. The largest community cloud or Alliance cloud available here across the country is the Arbutus cloud that was recently refreshed and deployed in April. That's based in University of Victoria. And specifically at the Arbutus Cloud at the University of Victoria, you can now deploy a virtual machine that runs the Linux operating system, but also the Windows operating system. And then here on the slide here, there's a quick link to the quick start guide and how to, once you have access to these resources, how you be able to spin up these virtual machines. Speaking of how to get access to resources, there are two main steps. First, like the high-performance computing clusters, you'll need to first request access to the cloud itself through the CCDB portal. Here are the steps where you request for access. So for example, in this screenshot, you're requesting for access to the Arbutus cloud. The second step, you'll need to email cloud@tech.alliancecan.ca, essentially requesting access to if you're a PI, there's a separate form to request for the resources, but you're not a PI, you'll request for access to your PI's cloud project. I'll pause here. I think there's someone's unmuted. Does anyone have any question? Okay. As I mentioned, those are the steps for when your PI has a project. But if your PI does not yet have a project, they can request for a cloud project by completing the application form linked on the slide deck. Any time of the year, you can request for a RAS or Rapid Access Service project, where with limits listed here in the table on the slide deck. And once you request for it, within approximately 2 business days, someone on the cloud support team will be able to respond and provision that project for the PI and then onboard other research team members so that they can access these resources. As part of the cloud, there are a couple type of instances available that you can have access to. They are categorized as first the persistent instances, so they have less CPU. They're intended to run indefinitely. So, for example, data portal, database server, a web application that is accessible from your web browser. There's something that is intended to run 24/7. Instances, there are also compute instances where have higher CPU and memory. So these are intended for more for analysis and for processing data. They're intended to be at most to be running at 1 month at a time. They're not intended to run indefinitely or 24/7 for over a month. They're intended one of the main use cases for these type of instances that have higher memory and CPU are for fine-tuning computational workflows. So you're tweaking your code, for example, tweaking your code, and you have a faster feedback loop because the resources are only you'll be able to access. And once it's fine-tuned, you'll be able to then scale up on the high-performance computing clusters, for example. Lastly, there's also virtual GPUs or GPUs. So on the Arbutus cloud specifically, there's an offering of a slices of an H100 GPU for RAS, which is, as I mentioned a couple of slides back, PI can request for access to a RAS cloud project any time of the year. You will have access to one GPU instance that has 12 gigabyte of GPU memories, free virtual CPU, and 35 gigabytes of memory and 125 gigabytes of ephemeral storage. There is another size that is double the size of this first of this GPU instance, but it's only available through the resource allocation competition, which we'll discuss later during this presentation. So And the recommendation that we have for researchers is that if you believe that you may need the larger GPU instances or even more than one, we highly recommend testing your workflow with the smaller and one instance of GPU during the year so that you'll be able to have additional justification when the annual competition comes around. Some of the use cases for these virtual GPUs include real-time interactive needs, access directly from a science gateway, so a web application that runs some sort of a workflow on a GPU. You require environment with software that do not easily integrate into high-performance computing environments, and also like the computational compute instances is also for fine-tuning computational workflow. So you're testing your code, tweaking your code to make it more fine-tuned, and then when you're ready, then you can also scale up to the bigger GPU resources available on the high-performance computing clusters. Storage. So besides the memory, the GPU, the cores that are running virtual machines for you, there's also storage on the cloud. So there is volume storage that is most commonly used. Is you can imagine it being similar to the storage drive that is connected to your local desktop, but in this case, it's remotely on a virtual machine. Ephemeral disk storage, I briefly mentioned it in the last slide, where so compute instances and GPU instances have ephemeral storage. What that means is it's storage intended for data or for intermediate files that are not intended to stay forever. Once the compute instance or GPU instance is shut off, the data sitting on these ephemeral storage will also be gone. Object storage, it's ideal for storing, archiving, and backing up. So as part of a cloud RAS project, you can request up to 10 terabyte of this type of storage. Shared file system storage, if you have you want to create an infrastructure or create a system workflow where you require multiple machines accessing the same set of data that sits on one storage, we recommend using shared file system storage. And the RAS requests, you can also request up to 10 terabyte of this type of storage. So once you have access to all these resources, the ones we talked about, CPU, persistent instances, compute instances, virtual GPU, you'll be able to log into the dashboard to leverage these resources, launch or deploy these virtual machines. For example, for Arbutus, you'll be able to go to this link, and then you, through your your preferred web browser, and this is the type of dashboard you'll see to help you manage the resources that are allocated to you. Once you've deployed the virtual machines or cloud resources, how do you access these resources? So if you deploy the Linux virtual machine, you access it through SSH. So you access your virtual machine will need to have something called floating IP. Essentially, it is an IP address. It's a set of 4 numbers that is accessible on the to the World Wide Web. You need the username of the operating system. So, for example, if you're deploying an Ubuntu virtual machine, you'll use the username Ubuntu. Element Linux is Element Linux. Rocky is Rocky. There are other Linux operating systems available, and if you go to the quick start guide that I linked at the beginning of this section, you'll be able to see a list of all those usernames and operating system. And lastly, you need an SSH key. You can't SSH into these virtual machines with a password. For best practices, SSH keys are required. If you choose to deploy a Windows instance, Windows virtual machine, because your software only runs on Windows, for example, you have to access it with 2 steps. First, after you deploy the Windows virtual machine, you first set the administrator password in the console. So you go through the dashboard, you go to the Windows virtual machine. There's a tab called Console. In there, you'll be asked to set a password. You set your password. Once you have set your password, now you can go to use something called remote desktop connection, and that is something that comes with any Windows laptop, Windows workstation. If you're not running Windows, there are similar type of software available to install for Mac and Linux with a similar name. Once you use that software, you provide the floating IP to that software and the username using the username administrator, you'll be prompted for the password that you set in the first step. Enter the password, then you'll be able to authenticate or log into your Windows machine. So that's high performance computing cluster and the cloud for both. You can request for access. PIs can request for access any time of the year. They'll be provided a default allocation, or in cloud's case, a project with quotas up to those certain limits that were listed in that table. If you do require more resources than that, there is a resource allocation competition known as the RAC that's run annually every fall. Usually the announcements and the competition opens in September. So if you are interested, look out for those announcements and those information sessions where they will share about that year's competition dates, important dates, and also what changes have been made to that competition for that year. And then if you are awarded for that competition, you will be notified in the following year. So for this upcoming competition, you'll be notified in around March of 2027, and their allocation will be available beginning April. We highly recommend that you consult with ARC for these competition if you have any questions as early as possible, but the minimum 1 week before the deadline, so that we'll be able to provide you the advice and ways that you can improve your justifications, for example, and you have time to update your applications before the deadline. For more information about this competition, some of the information is still based on last year's call, but some of the information is still pretty relevant. You can go to the link there at the bottom of the slide. So that's for computing services. Do we have any questions before I touch on other services that are also made available through the Digital Research Alliance of Canada? Okay, then I'll move forward. PACE clusters. So there are something called PACE clusters, or Pan-Canadian AI Compute Environment. They are dedicated systems for AI workflows. So there are 3 clusters across the country listed there. And then there's documentation about these clusters at the bottom there as well. So for eligibility, so it is a tiered, unlike the cloud and the high performance computing clusters, where every academic principal investigator can request for access to at least a default allocation. The PACE cluster has a tiered model. So if you have a higher allocation or a larger allocation, if you're a Canada SciFar AI chairs or equivalent and the research team, or AI Institute faculty affiliates. But if you're not, we still are eligible for access as a PI. So faculty members with a 10-year track appointment at the Canadian University with an AI program, or a faculty member of a 10-year track appointment at Canadian University applying AI to other domains. You are also eligible, you just may have a smaller allocation. For more information, again, go back to the documentation that's linked at the last slide, or contact the support team behind these clusters, and their contact information are also in the documentation. If you are determined that you are eligible or your PI has an allocation, you can request access to the cluster. So you'll, like all the other resources, you'll go to CCDB and then go to the particular PACE cluster that you have your PI has access to and select I request access. So there is an additional step compared to the HPC clusters, for example, where you do have to indicate whether you are doing research with AI program at the Canadian University or you're applying AI to your research. Next, there is also a quantum computing service available, and this is based in the system is based in Quebec. It's a 24-qubit superconducting quantum computer. Some of the use cases includes computations requiring small quantities of high fidelity qubits, modeling small quantum systems, and also testing new methods and techniques for quantum programming and error corrections. For more information about this quantum computing service or the system called Monarch, feel free to go to the documentation linked on the slide. There's also information about contact email and such. So here's also a link on the instructions on how to request for access to this system. And including all the eligibility and then also the questions that the supporting team behind the service may ask you to kind of articulate how you plan to use this quantum computer. The support email is also listed on the slide deck, but also at the documentation that I linked in the previous slide. Okay, other services. So beside everything that is computational and running virtual machines, the Alliance also has services that are also to support research data management. First, there is a Nextcloud service. It's Dropbox-like for cloud storage, for data sharing, and collaborating on documents. every user has 100 gigabytes. So to access, you log into the Nextcloud at the link there, the second last link there on the slide with your CCDB account, and you'll be able to access your quota. And then for more information, feel free to go to the documentation at the last bullet point there. Next, Globus. It's a service for fast, reliable, secure transfer of files, especially if you're transferring terabytes of data. Globus is a very helpful tool. And you'll also be able to share your data using this interface. So to log in, you go to globus.org with and log in with Alliance account. If you can also log in with your university's credentials, for example, UBC campus-wide login. Globus is available on most of the Alliance computational services, including all the high-performance computing clusters, and also the Arbutus Cloud object storage. So you'll be able to transfer data between these services. Globus is also available in many university-specific computational services, including here at UBC, our high-performance computing cluster sockeye, and also our object storage service Chinook also has Globus enabled. You'll be able to transfer data to and from our UBC resources to the Alliance and vice versa. And most recently, we've made available for UBC OneDrive that you can access your OneDrive quota or folders and data with Globus as well. So again, you can transfer data to and from all of these different Globus endpoints. Next, database service. So there is a managed database service. So the Alliance, and they're based, the main one being at the Arbutus Cloud. You have access to either a MySQL database or a Postgres database. You can request access by emailing cloud@tech.alliancecan.ca. And then for further information and documentation on how you can use the service and what the service includes, feel free to go to the documentation link there on the slide. One main primary benefit of using a database service includes that you do not need to maintain and manage all the system administrator type tasks for this database. You will be only responsible for both using it and also making sure you're in compliance for your data, but then all the security updates and etc. Those are managed by the support team at the respective cloud sites. Another benefit includes if you're using a database at FUR Cloud or the FUR High Performance Computing Cluster, that database service allows you also to access the FUR High Performance Computing Cluster. So for example, we have seen researchers' workflow where their job running off the FUR cluster requires writing their data to a database. You'll be able to do that with the database service that's hosted at FUR Cloud by also running the workflow on the FUR high performance computing clusters. In addition, there is a database management assistant. It's a bilingual tool for preparing data management plans, or also known as DMPs. This is becoming more and more common requirement for a lot of granting agency. So this tool helps researchers to put these data management plans together, asking the researchers through step-by-step through the data lifecycle key questions to help them build this plan. So you'll be able to access this service, this tool through that link there on the slide, and you can log in your UBC CWL. For more information and documentation, the link is there on the slide as well. Next is Borealis. So we've discussed a lot of services that kind of sits in the active research stage of the research life cycle. Borealis kind of falls in help supporting researchers in the after the research project is is being wrapped up. It allows you to essentially share your research data, of course, as long as it complies with all the compliance requirements that you need to comply with or follow. And you'll be able, and the UBC library will support you on that. And then, and this may be able to help you with also uh, journals or manuscripts requirements where you need to be able to share your data as well. Similarly, there is another service called Further. It's also a bilingual platform, and this is for allowing you to share your data if your data sets are more than just a few gigabytes, or if your files are larger than 5 gigabytes. The Further platform or solution, a service is probably a better fit, and it leverages other tools to help you be able to better manage larger data sets and larger data. Similar to the other services that I've linked here, the link to how do you access the service, and then in this case, the lines of your lines or CCDB account, and the documentation is listed there at the bottom. And last but not least, I believe this is, yes, this last but not least, the NORIS. It's a national discovery service. So it's the, after you share your data, so whether it's through Further or Borealis or any other platform, Lunaris has compiled all the data sets and research data that other researchers and maybe yourself have shared across all the platform, and allows you to be able to search for these, and the idea behind that is to be able to more easily discover these existing data sets and then be able to reuse these data for research purposes. So to access, you can go to the link there below, and also for documentation, and also how you'll be able to leverage this service. It's all there on the documentation. Lastly, for all these services, how do you, besides contacting those individual support teams with your questions, how else will you be able to receive support, and also for training on how to use these services? So there is a UBC ARC provide training sessions, such, for example, the summer school that's happening this week. So you'll be able to access those resources there on the link there. First link there. A lot of sessions are recorded, including this specific one, and they'll be uploaded to the UBC ARC YouTube channel. Similarly, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, regional partners, institutions, all provide training. And many of those are also recorded and also open to researchers across the country. So to look for training that may be the upcoming training that's maybe available may not be in BC, but maybe in other provinces. You can search for those in the Explora, which is the Alliance training catalog. For support, if after all the training you still have questions, feel free to contact us with your questions, including ARC, UBC Advanced Research Computing at arc.support@ubc.ca, or if you have questions specific to the Alliance, and you can also contact support at tech.alliancecan.ca. With that, that's the end of all my material and my slide deck. So at this time, I would like to open up to the floor if there's any questions that they would like to ask. Okay. Well, in this case, if there are no questions at this time, I will maybe pass it back to Rachel to share, to do some housekeeping, but I'll also be staying online if there are any questions after all that is done. I'll pass it back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So I'm just going to close off the session and share a few things with you. I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to load. It's taking a while. I'm just gonna try to do that again. Oh, okay. So for some reason, I'm not able to display my PowerPoint. I'm just gonna see if I can do it live here. Okay, okay. Let's see if I can just do it here. Um, so sorry about this. So I just want to share a few sessions with you. So this deck is about our upcoming sessions. Everybody should be able to see it, right? So this is our upcoming sessions. We have two sessions from a MATLAB tomorrow. It's the first one is parallel computing, and the second one in the afternoon is Introduction to Deep Learning with MATLAB. We also have a cybersecurity and research security session coming up on Wednesday morning. And we have a couple courses coming up offered by Dell Technologies on emerging technologies like physical AI and quantum-enabled environments. So please use this link or use the QR code to learn more or just register for the session. Lastly, we love to hear from you. So this is a short survey. It should take less than 3 minutes to do. I can share the link in the chat. And as a thank you, we will whoever like survey participants can enter into a draw to win a $20 Amazon gift card, and winner will be notified by email. All your feedback is going to help us to improve our sessions. So we'd really appreciate for you to complete the survey for us. And thank you so much for being part of our session today. We're so happy to see you, and we hope to see you in future sessions. Thank you so much. So here's the link to the survey form. And also the recording and the slide will be shared with you after. I'll try to do it at the end by the end of the day today, if not by the end of tomorrow. So you should get it fairly shortly. Thank you so much.